Does the Prime Minister and his entourage have to throw away their normal cell phones when they travel to China and use burner phones because they're afraid of having their phones tapped? That's not a sign of friendship, is it?
Oh, I would love to be able to treat on equal terms as Victor at once, but they need to set aside the spying, the security threats that they pose to us. They need to allow us, if they want us to trade with Xinjiang, for example, then why aren't British government officials and others from Europe allowed to go into those factories to check that the cotton, the components, the solar panels are not being produced by slave labor?
There is no slave in China, period. Don't fabricate facts about my country. There is no slave in China, period. Tim, if you claim there are slaves in China, you will never be allowed to enter China. That's my warning. Don't expect to come to China.
大家好，今天要分享的是一场火药味十足的英国电视直播辩论节选。对话双方是资深国际问题专家高志凯，以及对华抱有很深偏见的英国议员蒂姆施洛顿。整场对话以斯塔默首相访华作为切入点，全程围绕中英关系走向展开激烈对辩。先简单介绍本期核心人物高志凯教授，他深耕中外交流、国际战略领域数十年，常年穿梭中英两国，完整见证了双边关系几十年的起伏变化，对英国近代殖民历史、西方政坛的对华思维有着非常透彻的了解。多年来，他始终坚持客观中立发声，致力于打破西方社会对中国的刻板印象与不实误解。反观另一边的蒂姆史洛顿，全程不断抛出各类西方媒体流传的虚假说辞，从所谓监听风险香港问题，再到编造新疆不实谣言，处处带着旧帝国时代的傲慢与双重标准，不断刻意制造对立。面对对方源源不断的偏见抹黑，高志凯没有回避，而是结合历史事实、双边现实需求逐条回击，有理有据，不卑不亢。接下来，我们一起来看这场观点碰撞极其激烈的访谈辩论。
Minister Starmer's visit to China has been a very successful visit. I think it will turn out to be a landmark visit, ushering in a more normal relations between China and Britain. Now, Britain used to be the British Empire. We know about that. And as an empire, it caused a lot of unpleasant things in China-British relations. That's also very well recorded in history. However, at this particular moment, I think both China and Britain need to look forward into the future. We should refuse to be hijacked by what happened in the past. We need to transcend the past and move into the future for mutual engagement, for mutual benefit. And in this spirit, I think while people say the golden era in China-British relations will never come back, being an optimist, allow me to emphasize that we may need to establish the new platinum era in China-British relations.
You're upgrading it from gold to platinum.
Yes, exactly. I think at this particular moment, Britain needs many things which China can really offer. For example, Britain needs foreign direct investment to create more jobs. Britain needs more manufacturing productions. Britain needs more power, for example, and Britain needs a better energy security paradigm. I think in all these important things, China can help. China can help in building up connectivity, including both expressways of all kinds and high-speed railway. So treat China as the very important, or almost the most important megatrend in the world of today for your own benefit.
Right. And do you think then that China should replace America when it comes to a special relationship for us?
I don't think so. The United States has its own role, and we all know that the Pax Americana is starting to fade away, especially after what the United States did to many countries, including what they did to Britain after dismissing what positive roles Britain had played in the war in Afghanistan. I think it is a very important turning point in history. And I think after Pax Americana, all of us need to prepare for Pax Zhonghua or Pax Sinica. So I think we need to realize that China is the most important megatrend. You dismiss China at your own peril and to your own disadvantage. With or without the United
Victor,
States.
Sorry to interrupt, but that sounds a bit like a warning. That sounds a bit like a warning.
No, it's not a warning. I always believe a megatrend is not a warning. A megatrend is a very pragmatic, a very realistic assessment or prediction for something to come. And with or without the United States, I think China and Britain need to have all the incentives to improve their bilateral relations for mutual benefit.
Okay. But Victor, why, if we're going to be such great friends, why does the Prime Minister and his entourage have to throw away their normal cell phones when they travel to China and use burner phones because they're afraid of having their phones tapped? That's not a sign of friendship, is it?
Well, if they are worried about, for example, being espionaged against, that's not reflection of the realities in China. That reflects some kind of a very dark things going on in their own soul, at the bottom of their soul. They should be very confident about China. China is such a megatrend that China has all the confidence itself. I hope Britain, with its very important past, as well as the present role, as well as the future role to be played by Britain need to have enough confidence in itself rather than worrying its own head off for being espionaged by China.
Tim Lawton, who's also on the line, still has the sanctions hanging over him. Could you explain to him why that is?
Well, I hope he will do more to realize that China is a megatrend, not to be completely disregarded or dismissed or neglected. And he should say things which reflect the realities about China. And he should do things to promote the real fundamental interests of the British people by engaging with China rather than alienating China. China is a factor that if you alienate China, you alienate the fundamental interests of the British people. That's my very real, kind-hearted advice for His Excellency.
I want whatever Victor Gao's on, because he's in complete la-la land. And so much for a platinum era. I'm afraid there's severe metal fatigue in the relationship between China, not just the UK, but the rest of the West. I agree with Victor. You dismiss China at your peril. But that was rather a menacing phrase we had from Victor there, because China does matter. But I'm afraid it matters more for the negatives and the threats that it poses to the UK and the West than the opportunities that certainly under the current dictatorial regime offer to us in terms of investment and other trading opportunities. And the Prime Minister is on his jet, coming back on his burner jet. It wasn't just burner phones, they had to have burner laptops, and they couldn't even take the official government plane out there. He's coming back from China with pretty thin gruel, having frankly been rather humiliated. So in terms of this being a huge success and a turning point, goodness knows what Victor's been on.
Victor, I won't ask you what you've been on, but what do you make of Tim's response?
Tim, let me ask you one question. Tell me, what's your assessment? In what way does China threaten the fundamental interests of the British people? Tell me your true assessment.
How long have we got? You've read.
We've got another 4 minutes, guys. So you know,
Intelligence and Security Committee.
I hope you will finish that in 30 seconds.
In very comprehensive terms, the security threat that that China poses to the UK. We had to pass legislation, the National Security and Investment Act, to keep Chinese-sponsored companies out of infrastructure projects in the UK.
Rather than fantasy.
This isn't fantasy. Why is it that the Chinese governments have been caught red-handed with tapping phones in Number 10, spies in Parliament? The Chinese government has bounties
real evidence.
a million
real evidence.
Okay,
Again, your dilution,
sir. Victor, let me speak. You had an awful lot to fantasize about. There's real evidence that Hong Kong citizens who've had to flee Hong Kong because China has completely shredded up the international treaty that handed over Hong Kong, absolutely no respect for international law. There are bounties of $1 million Hong Kong dollars on those people to be repatriated to China. People in this country, not just MPs, ex-MPs, Uyghurs and others, are being daily intimidated by the police stations which the Chinese government have set up in this country to drag in dissidents off the streets and beat them up. We know.
Let me say one
these
thing
are all
in
facts.
response.
You may not like them, but that is the true face of China.
I'm
and in China itself,
let Victor respond to this ping pong.
Tim, let me tell you one thing. If you do not understand history, let me teach you some history. Britain had very extensive national security operation in Hong Kong before they left Hong Kong on June the 30th, 1997. This is the fact. If you do not know this fact, you can treat Victor Gao as your tutor. I know better than you do. Britain had extensive national security operation in Hong Kong. Therefore, after the handover, China absolutely has power and authority to engage in national security operations in Hong Kong, as the British Empire and the British Hong Kong government did before July the 1st, 1997.
We didn't shoot demonstrators, Victor.
British people.
Victor, we didn't shoot demonstrators. We didn't put bounties on the head of people overseas outside the territorial regime of China itself. Don't try and equate British rule over Hong Kong, which was a beacon of liberty, entrepreneurialism, into what it's become now, where the rule of law has gone out of the window.
That's what
freedom of speech has gone out the window. People can't even demonstrate.
Authority in Hong Kong. They took over Hong Kong from Chinese ownership, and now you want to be an angel for your role in Hong Kong? Come on, Tim.
Okay, let me intervene, gentlemen, just for a second. One to you, Victor. Why, we're going to speak to Jimmy Lai's son, Sebastian, after the break. Why is Jimmy Lai, who's 78 years old and suffering from diabetes, who had the impertinence of having a newspaper that spoke its mind, why is he in jail?
Let me tell you why. Jimmy Lai colluded with foreign powers, tried to overthrow the authority of the People's Republic of China in Hong Kong. He wanted to overthrow the legitimate government of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region in Hong Kong. He wanted to create chaos in Hong Kong.
Okay.
Where's your evidence?
Than I do. He was working with CIA. Come on.
Oh, come on.
Victor, rubbish.
So, okay, let me ask, let's move on swiftly. Another question, Victor, to you is this. We know what Britain wants out of China, which is direct investment. What does China actually want from Britain other than cheaper whiskey?
No, China needs from Britain nothing more, nothing less than equal treatment. Even though China is much bigger than Britain, China wants to have equal treatment by China in Britain and by Britain for China. That's the equal treatment. We deserve no more, no less. We need to get along with each other as completely equal partners, rather than Britain lecturing China or China lecturing Britain, like Tim wants to lecture me.
I want to have closer relationships with our EU partners. We have an awful lot in common. We don't need to be part of the EU to do that. I want better relations with the US as well. It is a very important trading relationship and very important diplomatic relationship. There are problems with it under President Trump now. But that is not a case for leaping into the arms of China, who I would love to be able to treat on equal terms as Victor wants. But they need to set aside the spying, the security threats that they pose to us. They need to allow us, if they want us to trade with Xinjiang, for example, then why aren't British government officials and others from Europe allowed to go into those factories to check that the cotton, the components, the solar panels are not being produced by slave labour, as we know that they are, and we have the evidence for it. Only when China surrenders itself to international laws and norms and standards that we all trade under can they possibly expect to be treated on an equal basis. And we are a long way away from that. And frankly, Victor needs to admit that.
All right, Victor, you've got 20 seconds, then we've got to wrap it up.
Yeah. Tim, don't mention slavery to China. China never practiced the slavery for the past 2,000 years.
It's
very
doing
different
it now.
From your country.
It's happening now,
so tell
Victor.
Let me tell you, there is no slave in China, period. Don't fabricate facts about my country. There is no slave in China, period. Tim, if you claim there are slaves in China, you will never be allowed to enter China. That's my warning.
That's the problem.
Any.
That's the problem, because you're
don't
denying
expect
the
to come
truth.
To China.
You're
telling fabrications. You are telling falsehoods to mankind, and mankind refuse to be misled.
What about freedom of speech, Victor? Freedom of speech. Have you heard of freedom of speech?
You want to
doesn't
lock
give
me
you
up for just saying what I think.
reason to tell falsehood to mankind, to alienate relations between China and Britain. Your Prime Minister said, for 8 years, British leaders practiced the dereliction. You are practicing dereliction for preaching alienated the relations between China and Britain.
But I don't guarantee
That's the real problem.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up there.
看完整场辩论，说实话，最让我感慨的不是你来我往的唇枪舌战，而是西方部分政客根深蒂固的帝国思维与脱离现实的认知偏差。整场辩论下来，蒂姆从头到尾反复纠结的核心只有一件事：用一套固有偏见框定当下的中国。他纠结的从来不是客观事实，而是不愿放下早已过时的对抗思维。你能清晰看到一个很讽刺的细节：英国首相出访中国，特意更换一次性手机、笔记本，连本国官方专机都不敢乘坐。在他们口中，这是防范所谓安全威胁。可在高志凯一针见血的点评里，这根本不是中国存在风险，而是他们自身内心阴暗揣测的投射。曾经的大英帝国靠着殖民扩张掠夺全球，在近代给中国留下无数屈辱历史，这些都是白纸黑字记载的史实。可时至今日，部分英国政客依旧不愿意正视这段过往，习惯用当年殖民统治的视角审视中国，拿着双重标准评判一切。说起香港国安，他们刻意忽略当年英治时期在香港布置大量国安管控手段的历史，只单方面指责中国维护主权与社会稳定的合法举措，谈起新疆，凭空编造强迫劳动的虚假谣言，全然无视中国多年投入巨额资金发展当地民生，保障各族群众安居乐业的现实。他们还始终抱有一种扭曲优越感，张口闭口要求中国单方面遵守西方制定的规则，却完全回避自身历史上破坏国际条约、发起战争、掠夺他国的过往。他们一边需要中国的投资、基建产能、能源合作来缓解本国就业、制造业、能源短缺难题，一边又不断渲染中国威胁，主动疏远、遏制合作。这种自相矛盾的行为，本质上就是昔日帝国衰落之后的不甘与焦虑。高志凯在对话里提出的中英铂金时代，其实是非常务实的思路。过去中英有过经贸往来的黄金阶段，如今时代早已改变，两国完全可以放下历史包袱，抛开对抗思维，以完全平等的伙伴身份相处。英国需要中国的产业、基建、市场助力本国发展，中国也只想要对等尊重，不接受居高临下的说教与无端污蔑大国相处。从来不该是一方对另一方指手画脚，互利共赢才是长久之道。辩论中最触碰底线的，莫过于蒂姆凭空编造新疆存在强迫劳动、奴隶制的虚假谣言，这也是高志凯教授整场访谈里唯一一次态度强硬、直接发出警告的地方。2000多年以来，中国早已彻底废除奴隶制度，如今新疆更是持续投入海量财政资金，完善民生，扶持少数民族就业，建设产业园，完善农牧民保障，普及双语教育，各族群众自由劳动，自主择业，安居乐业，是所有人都能亲眼见证的现实。西方部分政客无视各国使节、媒体实地走访的客观报道，靠着没有实据的传言捏造谎言，借棉花光伏产业链打压中国产业，本质是出于地缘竞争的刻意抹黑。高教授明确表态，持续散播这类虚假信息，将永久失去入境中国的资格。这不是所谓的威胁，而是底线提醒言论自由有边界，绝不包含肆意编造谣言、丑化他国、离间双边关系的权利，不分黑白的造谣，只会彻底斩断沟通对话的根基。整场辩论也暴露了西方当下普遍的认知缺陷，他们习惯用自身几百年的殖民扩张历史揣测中国发展道路，默认国家强大之后就会对外扩张，制造冲突，完全不理解中国传承千年和平发展、互利共生的文明内核。中国崛起从来没有发动战争，掠夺他国领土资源，依靠自身工业化、市场化发展实现国民富足， 对外合作始终坚持不干涉他国内政，这和过去大英帝国、如今美国的霸权路线有着本质区别。可这一点，很多西方政客始终不愿意去理解接纳。不少网友看完这段访谈都说看得解气，感慨高志凯教授不卑不亢，有理有据，面对层层抹黑没有退让，逐条用历史、现实事实反驳对方。但我们不能只停留在一时爽快，更要透过这场辩论看清长期趋势。中国崛起是本世纪无法逆转的最大时代大势。任何国家、任何政客都无法靠刻意抹黑、遏制、疏远阻挡这个进程，主动拥抱合作就能共享发展红利。执意沉浸帝国旧梦，持续制造对立，最后只会错失发展机遇，被时代浪潮甩在身后。毛主席有一段经典论断放在这里格外贴切：捣乱、失败，再捣乱，再失败，直至灭亡。这就是帝国主义和世界上一切持对抗思维反动派的逻辑。如今部分英国政客依旧困在旧日帝国的幻梦里，带着无处安放的傲慢和被迫害妄想，持续输出针对中国的虚假叙事，不断离间中英双边关系。未来英国究竟能不能摆脱美国束缚，放下偏见，与中国开展平等务实合作，还是持续走对抗消耗的老路，我们可以持续观望。到这里，这期视频的内容就全部梳理完毕了。搜集访谈素材，梳理双方观点，查证历史事实，花费了不少时间。如果你看完这期视频有所收获，觉得内容客观详实，麻烦动动手指订阅频道，多多点赞转发。如果你有不同的看法，补充观点，或是想聊聊其他中外交流访谈内容，都可以在评论区留言，每一条评论我都会认真阅读回复。我们下期视频再见。